But the RSPCA is disappointed the live sheep trade to the Middle East during summer has not been banned.
Once again, the economics of the live export industry have trumped animal welfare. The Australian public will be absolutely gutted by the response, by the McCarthy review and the Minister's response. His decision not to end the live export of sheep during May to October will do nothing to protect the welfare of those animals. The Minister told us that this review would be based on the science and the evidence. It is not. He said that the review would not be based on economics, but it is. The science is clear. The AVA, the Australian Veterinary Association, the RSPCA, and the available scientific evidence have made it clear that May to October, the high-risk period for live sheep exports, has to be avoided if we are going to prevent the type of incident that we saw on the Awassi Express. These incidents have happened year on year for decades. Thousands of sheep dying every year on a single voyage during this period. If we continue to allow those exports to happen, then we have gone against what the Australian public's expectations are.
That there because the RSPCA has stepped up for a media conference in Canberra. This is on the live sheep trade.
The Minister told us that this review would be based on the science and the evidence. It is not. He said that the review would not be based on economics, but it is. The science is clear. The AVA, the Australian Veterinary Association, the RSPCA, and the available scientific evidence have made it clear that May to October, the high-risk period for live sheep exports, has to be avoided if we are going to prevent the type of incident that we saw on the Awassi Express. These incidents have happened year on year for decades. Thousands of sheep dying every year on a single voyage during this period. If we continue to allow those exports to happen, then we have gone against what the Australian public's expectations are. The Minister has supported a recommendation in the McCarthy review for an 11 to 39% increase in space allowance on board live export vessels. That's the only recommendation that is going to take effect today. That's the only recommendation that will actually have any significant improvement or change to animal welfare over the next 3 months. Let's be clear, that's a complete misunderstanding of the science that has been presented to this review. This space does not do anything to reduce the ambient temperature in the Middle East. Increasing space allowance doesn't mean that sheep will not suffer from heat stress. Even if there was one sheep in a single pen, during that time of year, sheep will still suffer from heat stress. So increasing stocking density is the very least that could be done, and any increase in stocking density needs to be applied across the entire year. The increase that the Minister has recommended will only ensure that sheep are prevented from suffering consistent harm during the voyage. It is the minimum absolutely necessary, and it won't even apply to sheep outside of the May to October period. This increase in stocking density doesn't allow sheep to lie down at the same time. It doesn't allow them to all easily access food and water. In order to allow sheep to have that, you need to at least halve the stocking densities. So what the Minister has done is taken the economics of the trade and put that ahead of animal welfare yet again. None of the changes that have been put into place will prevent sheep from suffering and dying this Middle Eastern summer. They will still be going on journeys. There is nothing that will change the ambient temperature and humidity that these sheep will be going into. We believe that what the Minister has done has been entirely What the Minister has done is responded to the economic interests of the industry yet again. It has put economic interests ahead of animal welfare. Okay, I'm happy to take questions.
Those economic interests you speak about, that's farmers' livelihoods. That's an important thing, isn't it?
Look, it's really important that in the long-term interest of the trade, we look at those aspects. But what we've seen in terms of the public response to the footage that was shown on 60 Minutes is that there is no second chance. There should be no second chance for this industry. What's happened in this review is really nothing has changed. And the industry is, apart from changes in stocking density, the trade was still going to continue in this May to October period. I think the public expects animal welfare to be put ahead of economic interests. We know that this is a dying trade overall. We know that we've gone from 5 million live sheep exports to only 1.8 million in 2017. We know that the chilled and frozen meat trade is increasing rapidly. In fact, there was a 20% increase in that in air freight of lamb carcasses in the last year alone. So rather than shoring up this industry to continue, we should be looking at that transition, and a transition that helps farmers in the long term. But right now, we're talking still about putting thousands of sheep on board live export vessels, exporting them to the Middle East. In the Middle East in summer, they'll be going into temperatures of above 40 degrees. Nothing on board these vessels has changed other than a reduction in the number of sheep that will be loaded. That will not prevent sheep dying from heat stress.
Anything good in the recommendations?
One of the recommendations is to reduce the reportable mortality trigger from 2% to 1%. The RSPCA has been arguing for that change for the past 20 years. We're pleased to see that it's there, but unfortunately that's a post hoc change. It means that sheep still, 1% of a voyage, 1% of sheep on board a voyage will still have to die before a mortality report before an investigation occurs. That doesn't actually improve animal welfare. It just means that the department will be doing more to investigate why that's happened. We can tell the department why that's happened right now. It's because of heat stress. And nothing that's happened over the last 20 years, none of the investigations that have occurred have been able to solve this problem. Sheep still die on board these voyages because of the ambient temperature in the Middle East. We are putting sheep taking them from Australia to countries that are not suitable for live export. They are simply too hot and too humid. And even if you had 50 vets on board a vessel, they would not be able to prevent those sheep from suffering and dying.
Given the contents of this report, are you confident in the department's ability to regulate this industry?
We don't have confidence in the department's ability to regulate this industry. We've seen in the past that it's failed to regulate. So any changes to aspects like penalties or breaches of current legislation, they require the regulator to be efficient. They require the regulator to be able to enforce regulations. We're not seeing in this review the sort of root and branch change that needs to occur to have confidence in the regulator. And I'd like to just point something out in terms of the way in which the Minister and the Department have framed the observers that are on board vessels. So there are currently, since the 60 Minutes programme, there are observers on board vessels. They are being categorised as independent. They are not independent. They are departmental observers. They come from the Department of Agriculture. In order to have independent observers, you need them to be fully independent. We don't have any transparency currently in terms of what those observers are seeing. The reports from the observers are not being made public. So in terms of actually having independent oversight of what's happening on board live export vessels, we're still not seeing that.
Obviously, your position is that the trade should be ended, full stop, in general terms. Labor's position is that it will take some time to do that. I mean, is that something that the RSPCA can live with in terms of the impact on farmers and the industry, that it should take a few years to wind down, were it to be wound down?
Absolutely. We have talked in terms of a transition. We understand that the transition out of the live sheep trade will take time. But that's out of the trade altogether. Right now we're talking about May to October period, the high risk period. The RSPCA, the AVA, the science all tell us that exports during this time of year are too risky to contemplate. What the Minister has said today is that he is happy for those exports to continue. It's clear in that response that he has put economics ahead of animal welfare. That is not what the Australian public wants.
Thanks very much for that.
Excuse me, your name for the camera, please. Just
Yeah, it's Dr. Bidda Jones, Chief Scientist with RSPCA
Okay, we'll leave
Australia.
that there for the moment. Bidda Jones, I was live from Parliament House in Canberra, the RSPCA holding media conference. They're disappointed with the government announcement this morning that live sheep export trade will be allowed to continue. This was the government response after a review into the live sheep export trade sparked by images of those shocking conditions on a ship on which 2,500 sheep died last year on their way to the Middle East.